The sound of the docking clamps echoed through the hangar, a deep metallic thud that told Marcus the incoming shuttle had finally arrived. He had been expecting a delivery of supplies from the outer colonies, nothing more. As he stood near the open bay doors, sunlight spilling across the polished floor, he watched the sleek silver craft settle onto the landing pad. Steam hissed from the vents, and the hatch began to lower. Out of the shadows stepped a figure that made him freeze. She was tall, graceful, and unlike any visitor he had seen in years. Her skin was a soft shade of lavender that caught the light in a way that seemed almost alive. Long platinum-white hair framed her face, falling in smooth waves over her shoulders. She wore a cream-colored dress that was simple yet elegant, hugging her figure in a way that made her look both regal and dangerous. Her glowing eyes locked on him, and a small, knowing smile curved her lips. Marcus's mind spun. She walked toward him with steady steps, the sound of her heels tapping against the metal floor. Every movement was deliberate, confident. The hangar. Workers nearby stopped what they were doing, staring openly. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He knew her, or at least he thought he did. Years ago, on a remote outpost, he had met a small alien girl, shy and curious, who had followed him around for days. They had barely understood each other, but he had joked half serious that when she grew up, he would marry her. Back then, she had laughed in her own language, eyes wide with innocence. She had been barely up to his shoulder, wearing worn travel clothes and clutching a bundle of wildflowers she had picked for him. The war had come soon after, scattering people across the stars. He had assumed she was gone, lost like so many others. But now, standing before him, was no child. She had returned a grown woman, and the way she looked at him left no doubt she remembered that moment. "You said you would marry me one day," she said, her voice smooth, accented, and clear. It was not a question. Marcus blinked, the words hitting harder than any battle he had fought. Around them, the hangar seemed to grow quieter, as if everyone was holding their breath. He managed to find his voice. "I didn't think you'd remember that." She stepped closer, close enough that the faint scent of something floral reached him. "I remember everything," she replied. Memories rushed back to him, the little girl who had shattered him everywhere, bringing him small treasures she found. Sitting near him while he worked, laughing at his attempts to mimic her alien words. He had been younger then, brash and careless with what he said. But in that war-torn world, the promise had been a small light, a piece of kindness neither of them had forgotten. Now years later, it stood between them, stronger than ever. Marcus took a breath, trying to steady himself. "Why now?" he asked. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "Because now I am ready. And because I have come to collect what you promised." Her tone was calm, but there was an intensity in her gaze that told him she was serious. The workers in the hangar exchanged glances, clearly unsure whether this was a reunion or the start of something far more complicated. He realized that this was no casual visit. She hadn't come across the galaxy just to remind him of an old joke. Whatever her reasons, she meant every word. And for the first time in years, Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet, not from war, not from duty, but from the return of someone he thought he'd lost forever. Marcus could still feel every pair of eyes in the hangar on them. The alien woman stood tall and unwavering, her gaze fixed entirely on him. Her calm confidence made it clear she didn't care who was listening. Marcus took a slow step closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You crossed half the galaxy. For this?" he asked. Her lips curved faintly, but her eyes stayed sharp. "I crossed it because promises matter," she said. He wanted to ask her 100 questions: where she had been, what had happened to her people, why she had chosen to find him now, but the weight of her presence kept him still. She was no longer the girl he remembered trailing after him with wildflowers. This was a warrior in her own right, someone who had seen things and survived them. Her beauty was striking, but there was steel beneath it, and it made him tread carefully. She took another step forward until there was almost no space between them. "You gave me your word," she said again, softer this time. Marcus's chest tightened. He thought of the battlefields, the years of loss, the countless faces that had come and gone. She was one of the very few pieces of his past that had returned. The promise had been made in a time when they had both been different people, but here she was, holding him to it. The sound of boots on metal broke the moment. Two of Marcus's fellow soldiers entered the hangar, both carrying crates. They stopped, short when they saw her, their eyes narrowing. "Who is she?" one of them asked. Marcus straightened his shoulders. "She's here for me," he said firmly. That answer only deepened their suspicion. One soldier's hand drifted toward his sidearm. The alien woman's eyes flicked toward the movement, her posture shifting subtly like she was ready to strike. "Easy," Marcus said, raising a hand toward both sides. "She's not a threat." The soldier holding the crates looked unconvinced. "You sure about that?" "Because she doesn't look like someone who came here for a friendly chat." Marcus met his gaze and didn't blink. "I'm sure." After a long pause, the two men moved on, though not without a few wary glances over their shoulders. Once they were gone, the alien woman's attention returned to him completely. "You live among warriors," she said, her tone more like an observation than a question. Marcus nodded. "And you?" She tilted her head slightly. "I have fought, yes, but I did not come here for battle." Her words carried weight, each one deliberate. She wanted him to understand this was personal. Marcus gestured toward the open doorway at the far end of the hangar. "Let's talk somewhere quieter." She agreed with a single nod. They walked together down the narrow corridor toward his quarters. The hum of the station's systems filled the silence between them. Marcus found himself glancing at her more than once, still trying to match the woman beside him with the memory of the girl from years ago. The differences were countless, but the look in her eyes, the one that had studied him so intently back then, was exactly the same. Inside his quarters, the door slid shut behind them, muting the sounds of the station. She moved to the center of the room, her eyes scanning everything with quiet interest. Marcus leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "You really meant it," he said. "Every word," she replied without hesitation. The firmness in her voice left no room for doubt. He searched her face for any hint of uncertainty, but found none. For a long moment, neither spoke. The tension between them was sharp, but not hostile. Marcus knew there was more to her return than just a promise, but he also knew pressing too hard might push her away. She had crossed the stars to find him, and whatever her reasons, she wasn't leaving until she got what she came for. Marcus stayed leaning against the desk, watching her as she took in every corner of his quarters. She moved with quiet grace, her pale lavender skin catching the soft light from the overhead panels. Her gaze lingered briefly on the shelf where he kept a few personal items, old medals, a worn field knife, and a single framed picture. She stepped closer to the picture, tilting her head slightly before looking back at him. "You kept things from your past," she said. Marcus shrugged. "A few." She pointed to the picture, and he stepped forward. It was a photograph of a small group from the outpost years ago, including the younger version of her, smiling shyly beside him. "This," she said, touching the frame lightly, "is proof you remembered too." Her voice carried no accusation, only certainty. Marcus found himself holding her gaze longer than he meant to. He took the picture from her hand and set it back in its place. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," he admitted. "And yet here you are." She nodded once, as if that was exactly how it was meant to be. "I survived because I carried your words with me. In the worst moments, they were a promise that something waited beyond the war." Her tone was calm, but Marcus could hear the truth in it. She had not come here lightly. The room felt smaller as the silence stretched. Marcus finally asked, "What happened after we were separated?" She stepped back slightly, crossing her arms. "My people fled to the edge of known space. Many were lost. I trained as a fighter, not because I wanted war, but because war found us again. Years passed. But in my mind, there was always one thing unfinished." Her eyes fixed on him. "You gave me your word, and I came to claim it." Before Marcus could answer, an alarm blared from the corridor outside. He moved to the door, checking the control panel. The station's alert system flashed red unidentified ships approaching. The alien woman stepped to his side, reading the display. "Not your people," she said without hesitation. "Raiders." Marcus's jaw tightened. "They'll be looking for supplies, maybe prisoners." She studied him for a moment, then said, "Then we stop them together." Her voice left no room for debate. They moved quickly, heading toward the armory. Marcus handed her a compact rifle, but she shook her head, reaching for a blade from the wall instead. "This I trust," she said, testing its weight in her hand. Marcus grabbed his own gear, strapping on body armor and checking his sidearm. The sound of distant impacts echoed through the station, signaling the raiders' breach. He glanced at her. "Stay close," she smirked faintly. "You too." When they reached the main corridor, smoke was already filling the air. Figures in patched armor stormed forward, weapons raised. Marcus fired first, dropping one before they could react. The alien woman moved like a shadow, darting into close range and striking with precision. The raiders were caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of their defense. Together, they pushed the attackers back toward the hangar. One raider managed to break through, sprinting toward the control room. Marcus turned to give chase, but the alien woman was faster. She intercepted him, knocking the weapon from his hands before delivering a swift kick that sent him sprawling. Marcus arrived just in time to see her finish the fight, the blade in, her hand dripping. She met his eyes briefly before moving on without a word. By the time the alarm shifted from red to yellow, the last of the raiders had fled. Marcus leaned against the wall, catching his breath. She stood nearby, barely winded, her blade still in her grip. "You fight well," he said. She tilted her head slightly. "You do not break your word," she replied. There was no smile, but her eyes carried a glint that said more than her voice ever could. Asterisk. The station's corridors still smelled of burnt metal and smoke. Marcus walked beside her, scanning the walls for damage. They had pushed the raiders back, but the fight had left its mark. Sparks hissed from a broken panel, and the faint hum of the station's systems sounded weaker than before. She moved quietly, her steps steady, her gaze always forward. Even without words, she carried an unshakable presence. They stopped at the control room. Marcus tapped the console, bringing up the station's status. "Shields are down. Communications are limited. We can't call for help right now." She leaned over his shoulder, reading the display. "Then we repair it," she said simply. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You have experience with human tech?" She smirked faintly. "With many kinds of tech, survival teaches you fast." Her tone was calm, but there was pride in her voice. Handed her a set of tools, and together they moved through the damaged sections. She worked quickly, hands sure and precise. Marcus watched her once or twice, noting how her pale lavender skin caught the dim light, how her eyes never wavered from the task. She was not here just to survive, she was here to stand beside him. It was a strange feeling, one Marcus had not let himself think about in years. As they repaired a power junction, Marcus finally asked the question that had been in his mind since her arrival. "When you came here, was it only for the promise?" She paused, looking at him. "At first, yes. A promise given in youth, in the middle of chaos. But I also came to see if the man who saved me then was the same man now." Her words were direct, but they carried something heavier beneath them. Before Marcus could reply, The console on his wrist beeped. Motion sensors detected movement near. The outer docking bay, he frowned. Raiders wouldn't return this quickly. She straightened, tightening her grip on the blade at her side. Then someone else has come. We should see who. They moved together toward the bay, keeping low as they approached. Through the small viewport, Marcus saw a small craft, its hull scorched but intact, docking slowly with the station. The hatch opened and 3 figures stepped out. Their armor was unfamiliar, but their movements were organized. One raised a hand in greeting, showing they carried no weapons openly. Marcus stepped forward cautiously. State your purpose. The leader removed their helmet, revealing a face marked with old scars. We're not here to fight. We came to warn you. Raiders have allied with a larger force. This station is on their list. His voice was steady, but his eyes were urgent. Marcus listened, then glanced at the alien woman beside him. She met his gaze without flinching. If what you say is true, Marcus said to the newcomers, then you know more about their next move. The leader nodded. They will return with greater numbers. You have hours, maybe less. The alien woman stepped closer to Marcus. Then we prepare now. Her tone left no doubt. It was not a suggestion. They began setting up defenses in the corridors and sealing off weaker sections of the station. The newcomers worked alongside Marcus and the alien woman, moving with silent efficiency. Between tasks, Marcus noticed her giving quiet orders to the others, her presence drawing attention naturally. She was no longer just a girl from his past, she was a leader in her own right. And every glance she gave him carried the weight of shared history and unspoken trust. When the preparations were done, the station's lights shifted to battle mode, bathing the halls in a pale red glow. Marcus stood at the central control point, scanning incoming data. The alien woman stood to his right, her blade strapped to her thigh, ready. When this is over, she said quietly, we will speak of the promise again. Marcus nodded. Once, we will. The sound of approaching ships began to rumble through the station walls. The rumble outside the station grew into a deep vibration that rattled the floor beneath their boots. Marcus gripped the edge of the console, eyes locked on the tactical display. Multiple hostile ships were approaching fast. The alien woman stood beside him, her posture steady, her golden eyes fixed on the data feeds. There was no fear in her expression, only readiness. The first impact shook the station as enemy boarding craft latched onto the hull. Alarms blared, and the corridors lit up with warning strobes. Marcus turned to the others. Positions now. The newcomers moved to guard the docking points, while Marcus and the alien woman headed to the main corridor. The sound of metal grinding against metal echoed around them as the enemy forced their way inside. When the hatch blew open, armored raiders poured through. Marcus fired in controlled bursts, forcing them to scatter for cover. The alien woman charged forward, her blade flashing in the red light. She moved like a force of nature, cutting down attackers with swift, precise strikes. Marcus covered her from a distance, dropping anyone who tried to flank her. The newcomers joined the fight, their disciplined movements keeping the enemy contained. Group of raiders broke off and tried to push toward the control room. Marcus shouted to hold the line and sprinted after them. The alien woman was already there, blocking their path. She met the first with a sharp kick, sending him into the wall. Then turned to parry a blow from another. Marcus reached her side, his rifle snapping out shots until the last of them fell. The fighting dragged on, the station's halls filled with the clash of steel and the crack of weapons. Slowly, the tide began to turn. One by one, the raiders fell back, retreating toward their ships. Marcus pushed forward, determined to drive them completely off the station. The alien woman stayed at his side, her strikes as fierce in the final moments as they were in the first. When the last enemy ship detached and fled into the black, the silence that followed was almost startling. Breathing hard, Marcus lowered his rifle. The alien woman straightened, wiping her blade clean before sheathing it. She turned to him, her gaze steady. "It is done," she said simply. Around them, the newcomers began checking the wounded and repairing damage. Marcus nodded. Feeling the tension in his shoulders finally ease, they walked back to the control room together. The station was battered, but still standing. Marcus leaned against the console, watching her as she looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. "You didn't have to stay and fight," he said. She turned to him. "I told you before. Promises matter. I will not leave until the one you made is kept." Her words carried no threat, only a quiet certainty. Marcus stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "And if I told you I meant it then, and I mean it now?" Her golden eyes locked on his, searching for the truth. "Then I stay," she said. There was no hesitation. No doubt. Just the same resolve he had seen in her from the moment she stepped off that shuttle. The others gave them space, sensing something important in the air. Marcus took a deep breath. "Then from this moment, we keep that promise together." A faint smile touched her lips, not playful, but real. She extended her hand, and he took it without question. The contact was brief, but unshakable. A silent agreement sealed between them. Beyond the station walls, the stars stretched endlessly in every direction. Inside, amid the hum of the systems and the faint scent of scorched metal, two lives once joined by a simple joke now stood bound by choice. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side.